Chapter 8. Maddie stood at the door and studied the other women and men standing in the room. She was dressed in shorts and an athletic bra and had one of Jake's old t-shirts knotted at her waist. Her locker key was tied to her shoestring, and her long black hair was in a ponytail. She was carrying her water bottle and a small towel. No one in the room looked even vaguely familiar, which made her feel a little self-conscious. She still had not regained the 30 pounds she had lost for the last assignment, and Maddie knew she looked way too skinny. She walked to the far corner of the room and picked her spot. "Hi there," a deep voice said from behind her. "It's nice to see a friendly face." Maddie turned around to see the handsome features of Nate smiling back at her. Now she really felt self-conscious and adjusted her clothes. Wow, did he ever look good in shorts? Maddie almost started drooling all over him. "Well," she said, "hello to you too. What are you doing here?" "Same as you. Mind if I stand here?" Not at all." But Maddie didn't like the idea of having him behind her while she bounced around like a little rabbit. With her having as much grace as a half-ton gorilla, she was even more anxious. Great, just what I need, him watching me bounce off the walls. I'm really going to impress him now. A Miss Olga Gorbachev look-alike strutted into the room. She had boxing gloves on her hands, and her legs were bigger than Maddie's waist. Wearing a two-piece black athletic aerobic exercise outfit, the Russian woman looked more male than female. Maddie wondered what her voice would sound like, but figured she'd find out real quick, and she was right. "Okay, kiddies, boys and girls, you are mine for the next 2 hours. Here in the box are some gloves. Be sure to get a left and a right. They also come in different sizes, so make sure you try them on. Once you find a pair you like, be sure to put them in your locker so you don't have to rumble through the box each session. There are also training bags along the walls. Be sure to get one of those, too." People stood around, waiting for others to move. "Come on now, move it," the Russian lady said loudly. Everyone scrambled to the box, and gloves began to fly. It didn't take long before everyone was back in their places with 2 gloves. Some had 2 rights or 2 lefts and were wondering what to do about it. Maddie looked around and didn't feel comfortable. Even the training bags along the wall looked like they would hit back. The Russian lady continued, "Okay, for those of you who didn't listen, come back up here and get 1 left glove and 1 right glove. Now, while they're trying to solve the puzzle up here, I'll introduce myself. My name is Patricia Yellen. I've been an exercise trainer for about 16 years. We'll get sweaty in this class, so you may want to bring a towel and some water, preferably in a bottle, not a cup. I see some of you have come prepared. That's good. We'll be working for about 45 minutes. I'll then cool you down, and I'll go into a more instructional phase on kickboxing techniques. You'll be learning hand combination, kicking combinations, hand and feet combinations, and advanced combinations. I'll also cover speed drills. We'll then do some cool-down crunches, push-ups, and light stretching. Are there any questions?" Patricia answered everyone's questions. If looks could kill, she would be successful just walking into a room, but it turned out she was very nice and eager to help. The class started, and before it was over, Maddie thought she would die. She was panting her chest off and had already finished her bottle of water. Her towel was drenched, and she was ready to quit. This had been a very long 120 minutes. When the class finally finished, Patricia announced the schedule and when she expected everyone to be dressed in place and ready to go. Instructional papers were distributed to all, and the class was dismissed. Maddie aimed for the door, anxious to hit the showers and anxious to get away from Nate. She didn't like the idea of him seeing her in such a state. "Mad, wait up." It was Nate. "You didn't do too bad of a job. You only fell twice, and you even hit your bag a couple of times," he joked. "Thanks. I was hoping you didn't notice." "Well, I did. Hey, I was hoping I could buy you lunch tomorrow. Our spot?" "Yeah, I'd like that. Regular time?" "You bet." They smiled at each other, liking very much what they saw. Maddie hurried through her shower. She had an advanced technology class and didn't want to be late. This would be an exciting class, and she was eager to learn some new stuff. But as she hurried to the elevators, there stood Nate. "Hey, we've got to stop meeting like this," he chuckled. "But I'm really enjoying it." His smile was pretty, and Maddie really did like looking at him. "Where are you heading?" he asked. "Up," Maddie replied. She wasn't sure how much to say. "Well, since we're in the basement, I kind of figured that much. What floor, young lady?" I think the 8th. She was hesitant in answering. The 8th floor required a special key. Nate looked at Maddie very seriously. He even took a step back. He pushed the elevator button but didn't take his eyes off her. The elevator started moving, then stopped on the 8th floor without opening. A voice came on over the loudspeakers. "Insert key, please." "Do you have a key, young lady?" Nate asked. Maddie pulled the key from her pocket. Nate looked even more concerned now. He then pulled his key from a chain around his neck. He inserted his key, and the door opened. Maddie's jaw dropped. Nate was also a hired killer. Chapter 9. Maddie and Nate approached the security guard, who said, "Please use the optical scanner." Maddie went first and was permitted access. Nate took a long look at Maddie, again with that deep, concerned look. He approached the scanner next and peered in. Confirmation complete. Nathaniel Edwards cleared. They walked down the corridor together in silence. Nate broke the quiet first. "What room?" he asked almost coldly. His mannerism frightened her. She wondered if he would still be interested in lunch tomorrow. Number 837. Number 867. Guess our luck isn't continuing. Will you meet me here in an hour? She needed to be brave, so blurred out what was on her mind. "If you're still interested, yes." "Maddie, I could never not be interested." He bent over and kissed her cheek. "There are more of those if you want them," he whispered in her ear. Maddie felt like melting to the floor. It had been a very long time since she had felt like this. "Yeah," she replied very softly, this time blushing for real. Her room was an ordinary classroom, with school desks and writing boards along the wall. The only difference was the rows of computers on the far left side and a huge video screen at the head of the class. She took a seat near the front and opened her notebook. The instructor was a very young man, almost a boy. He looked about 12, but she knew that couldn't be right. The clock clicked on the hour, and the instructor walked to the front of the desk. "I'm Dr. Bloomsbury. Welcome, and yes, I'm young. I'm 15, but I can assure you that I know more about electronic gadgets, how they work, and how to tailor them to your needs than you'll ever know. So let's get started." Dr. Bloomsbury began his lecture. His knowledge was extensive, and he sounded like an aged professor of electronics. He began with the basics, and Maddie was taking notes like crazy. The huge video screen popped on and followed the doctor's lecture. This was not going to be an easy class. She was going to have to learn, and learn fast. An hour later, Maddie was in the elevator with Nate, heading for the lobby. "Going home?" he asked. "Yep, gotta pick up my little one. I think I'll be bold. Want to come over for dinner tonight?" "Love to." Nate's smile was genuine, and Maddie was thrilled. They swapped addresses and phone numbers, and she gave him a dinner time. Maddie drove home, hovering about a mile above her car, with her head in the clouds. Dinner was on the table, and the candles were lit when Nate rang the doorbell. "Mommy, your friend from work is here. I'll get it," Toby yelled from the front room. Before Maddie could say a word, Nate was following Toby into the kitchen, holding a beautiful bouquet of spring flowers for Maddie and a package of little race cars for Toby. Toby's face lit. "Wow, Mommy, can I have them, please?" "Well, I guess so. What do you say?" "Thanks, mister." "That's Nate, Toby," Maddie corrected. "Sorry, Mr. Nate," Toby replied. "That is quite all right," Nate said, and rustled Toby's hair. Toby ran off with his new treasure, and Maddie smiled. "These are beautiful." She got out a vase and began filling it with water. Nate walked up behind Maddie and put his arms around her and gave her a small but very sweet kiss on the cheek. "You smell wonderful, and you feel just as good," he hummed into her ear. Maddie didn't know what to say or do. She continued fussing with the flowers until she had a vase filled with daisies, foxgloves, lazy susans, and a few yellow roses. It was radiant. Honestly, Nate said as he released his grip on Maddie and stood back, I feel as if I've known you for years. He brushed her hair away from her eyes. Same here, she said. They stood, staring at each other, with Maddie holding the vase. Let me put these on the dinner table, she said finally. He followed her into the other room, where a table was set for 3. The whole evening was very pleasant. Toby and Nate talked, but Nate did most of the listening. By the end of dinner, Nate knew every name in Maddie's family and how old everyone was and who was married to whom. Maddie excused herself and returned with a small homemade cake, some coffee, and more milk for Toby. After dinner, Toby ran upstairs to take a bath, and Maddie gave Nate the 25-cent tour of the house. They walked from the cellar to the attic and back again. Want to see outside? She asked. Love to. I'd follow you anywhere. Maddie's mind and the butterflies in her stomach were going crazy. She wanted to grab him and rip his clothes off, and it was hard to find the restraint. They walked through the backyard, admiring the fish pond and the flowers. They sat in the swing under the old oak tree and talked. He held her hand, and Maddie felt like a little girl who had a huge crush. She smiled at him. He looked directly into her eyes and asked, Where's Toby right now? He's in his room. Why? Nate looked directly into her eyes and asked another question. May I kiss you, Mad? I thought you'd never ask. He gave her the sweetest kiss she'd ever had. She never wanted it to end. He smiled and said, Wow. Maddie smiled back. The chemistry between them was very strong. If it didn't fade, they would soon be in trouble. At 10 o'clock, Nate announced that it was time to go. She walked him to the door and received another warm, passionate hug and kiss. Even though they had been doing this all evening, it seemed they couldn't get enough of each other. Nate never suggested anything more than hugs and kisses, and Maddie admired him for that. He wasn't going to rush and risk losing her. Don't forget lunch tomorrow, and sweet dreams, young lady. Matt, I really do like you a lot. He kissed her on the cheek, held her hand, and pulled her head into his chest. She could hear his heart beating and wanted to be closer to him. She wanted him. I'd better get out of here, he said. He stepped back, smiled, and winked at her. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you, Nate, Maddie said to herself. She wouldn't dare say it out loud. From the porch, she waved. She watched him pull out of the driveway. When she no longer saw the lights from his car, she locked the door and headed upstairs. Funny, she thought, we never mentioned anything about work. She had very sweet dreams that night, and Jake's picture was now sitting on Toby's nightstand. Maddie was healed. Chapter 10. Maddie couldn't wait to get to work the next day, but she never saw Nate. He didn't even show up for lunch at the gardens, and she was very disappointed. She drove home in silence as Toby played with his new cars. When Maddie walked into her living room, Susan was dusting a small round table in the corner. There's an envelope for you, Maddie, on the little table in the parlor. I have to run, but I started dinner. It's in the oven. Thanks, Susan. I don't know what I'd do without you. She hurried to the parlor and saw the note. It was addressed to Mad, and she knew right away whom it was from. Mad, on temporary assignment. Should be a quickie. I didn't see this one coming. Was picked up late last night while sleeping. I'll call you when I get back. Pray for me. But it was the signature that excited her. It was signed, Love, Nate. Love, Nate! Love, Nate! Maddie was a young girl again. She took Nate's note and laid it on the pillow next to hers and slept like a baby that night. She did one other thing she hadn't done in years. She said her prayers, especially for Nate, wherever he was. 3 weeks later, Maddie was having lunch at the gardens when a voice interrupted her thoughts. Excuse me, but you're sitting in my spot. Maddie smiled at Nate, very happy that he was home. That weekend, Maddie and Nate decided to get away, just the two of them. He said she could choose any place she wanted. She picked a bed and breakfast in Align, Oklahoma, a place called Heritage Manor. Maddie had seen an advertisement about it and had always wanted to go, but never had the opportunity. So with Toby safely tucked away at her brother's, Nate and Maddie headed out to Heritage Manor, only a few hours away. We don't get many locals checking in here, the owner said when they registered, but we're very happy to have you. She escorted them to their room and suggested they take a walk around the grounds before retiring. The owner excused herself and closed the door silently behind her. Nate locked the door and looked at Maddie. "Come here, my angel, my botanical goddess." They both laughed hysterically in each other's arms. "Talk about corny stuff, Mr. Nathaniel Edwards," she said. They were both ecstatic to be there. They hugged in a warm embrace, and Nate decided that day he would never let her go. Maddie and Nate remained in that room for the rest of the evening and night. It was their first time making love, and they wanted the warm feelings to last forever. About 11 p.m. they ordered in some food, and Maddie introduced Nate to his first carpet picnic. He loved it. While they were on the floor eating, Maddie had a chance to look around the room. They were definitely in one of the upper rooms because the ceiling was slanted. The window was of partial stained glass, and the hardwood floor was covered by an old oriental rug that had faded through time. Maddie and Nate loved it. They made a promise to come back over and over again, no matter how many other B&Bs were out there. This would be their special place. They made love again and again that night, and Maddie slept the best she had in years. After that weekend, Jake was only a fond memory that Maddie would never forget. Instead of yearning for Jake, she would be thinking of Nate. The next morning, after a rerun of the previous night, they showered, then enjoyed their breakfast on the terrace. The trees shaded them from the early morning sun, and the birds were eagerly chirping and singing just for them, or at least that was what it felt like. "This food is absolutely delicious," Nate said with a mouth full of homemade pancakes. Maddie looked at Nate with a tear in her eye. "It's beautiful here, Nate. Thank you. I suddenly feel alive again for the first time, and honestly, I don't know how long." Nate took Maddie's hand. "Mad, I'm falling deeply in love with you. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but I could not go on if you were not in my life. I don't know what the future holds for us, Mad, but I know we'll be together. I promise you that." Maddie continued to gaze at Nate's beautiful eyes. She was falling in love, and it scared her to death, but it was a warm and wonderful feeling that she had almost forgotten. She thanked God for bringing them together that day, and promised him she would make sure Nate never regretted meeting her. After breakfast, they enjoyed the beautiful gardens at Heritage Manor. They walked for what seemed like endless miles, enjoying the rare birds and animals together. They stood in front of the manor and gazed at its beauty. As they took pictures of each other, a man came down the steps to greet them. "Hello," he yelled from the curved steps. "Who's that?" Maddie asked Nate. "I think he's Carolyn's husband." "Who's Carolyn?" "The lady who checked us in last night." "Oh." The man walked up to Maddie and Nate and shook Nate's hand. "How do you do, sir? I'm sorry I wasn't available when you checked in yesterday. My name is A.J. You've met my wife, Carolyn." Nate estimated A.J. was probably in his 50s. He was of average height and stocky build, but what Maddie and Nate adored about him was his hat that perfectly matched his spunky personality. A.J. wore a black bowler hat and a matching bow tie. Maddie was instantly taken by this sweet, talking older man who was so eager to know his guest. A.J. held his elbow out to Maddie. She must have had a puzzled look on her face because A.J. said, "May I escort the pretty lady to lunch?" Maddie smiled and looked at Nate for approval. He winked at her. "Why, it would be my pleasure, sir," she said. She held her genuine smile all the way to the dining room where A.J. seated her. She was having a wonderful time, and it showed. Carolyn stepped out of the kitchen to greet the guests before serving lunch. Carolyn was about the same age as A.J., with beautiful reddish-brown shoulder-length hair. Maddie had never seen such thick, lush, beautiful hair before. Carolyn had a wonderful, warm personality that was instantly lovable. Maddie had lost her mother when she was a small child, and she used to pretend she had one, but after staying with Carolyn for a few days, Maddie realized what she had truly missed. Nate and Maddie had one more night together, and they used every second of it getting to know each other's minds, bodies, and souls. Maddie never wanted this weekend to end. Nate took Maddie in his arms and suggested that at least once a month they spend the weekend together alone. Let's make it a regular thing, he suggested. I'd love to, but what if we're on assignment? Well, we'll make it up when we get home. Mad, can I say something without you getting scared? Maddie became concerned. What is it? I love you, Mad. I've loved you from the first moment I laid my eyes on you at the gardens, and I believe that I want to marry you someday. He kissed her and hugged her close. Their bodies melted into one, and they made love again. Maddie lay on top of Nate and looked deeply into his eyes. I love you too, Nate. I never thought I'd feel this way again, but I do love you. They hugged each other close and slept soundly all night. They returned to Heritage Manor every chance they got. They became regular customers, and their relationship with Carolyn and AJ grew very close. The months flew by, especially with the knowledge that on the third weekend of each month she would be alone with Nate. The classes were not as hard as Maddie first thought. She had gained some weight, and her muscles eventually grew in strength and size. Her endurance increased, and the kickboxing class didn't seem so hard anymore. She loved having Nate stand behind her, and he helped her with her style and form. The technology class was very interesting, and Maddie thought of an approach as to how she'd handle her next assignment, which was coming up fast. Too fast.